Okay, my name is Leslie. I will be your speaker for today's mission control. Right, quick background about myself. Right, I'm a computer science graduate. I graduated last year. During my tenure, I've been engaging in with different companies, right? For my internship, I think some of you guys are actually familiar with these names like JTC, and you have our local fashion e-commerce like Zalora. Okay, at present, I'm working as a front-end developer at Envision, which is a energy company, and they are recruiting. So if you are interested, feel free to PM me, right? Either for internship or for full-time employment, etc. Okay, let's start off the workshop with the biggest question, right? So what exactly is UI and UX, right? Although I like to really lump these two terms together, but bear in mind that these two are completely different discipline on their own. So let's first start off with UI. So UI, more concerned about the presentation of our user interface, right? We deal with things like animation, responsiveness, fonts, colors, layout, etc. Some of you guys might be foreign to this term called responsive design, but basically it talks about the ability of your user interface to adapt, right, to a wide spectrum of device type as well as a Windows dimension. So sometimes maybe when you expand or shrink the window, you'll realize that the layout still looks good, right? This is what it means to be a responsive design. Then we take a look at UX. Okay, we deal with things like psychology, information architect, and also some research methodologies, personas, usability testing, etc. So really, this is more about research, trying to develop meaningful, right, interaction to drive the intention of the designer. Okay, without further ado, let's talk about user experience. On the right, you have this thing called a design honeycomb, right? With comprises of some key principles. So being able to manage them will lead to a user-centric design. So for example, when we talk about accessible, we talk about how accessible your interface is in terms of the kind, of audience that your product is catering for, and also the types of channels your product is catering for. When I talk about channels, I'm talking about whether your app is on desktop, or your app is a native app on Play Store, Google Store, or it's simply a web mobile application, right? So today's content, we will mainly be focusing on the user experience. In this case, we would like to talk about user design process, which can be split into 5 segments, right? So first off the bat, we will try to learn how to empathize with our user and find out their pain points. Then afterwards, we will try to define it into a concrete problem statement. Then we will try to brainstorm some key feature for our application. Then we try to piece them together into a interactive, right, prototype. Then of course, when you have prototype, you will need to test it to know if it's successful or not. Okay, so just now I have quickly run through the design thinking process, right? So hang on. Okay, so the first tool is actually parked under user research, right? This is actually the initial phase of the design thinking process, where you actually collect information from your user and then discover the current market need. After you're done, you proceed with ideation, right? And then prototyping stage, right? So when you're prototyping, sometimes you might realize that maybe you have missed certain edge cases, or you have missed certain features. So what happens is that you have to go back to the previous stage, go back to the drawing board, the ideation phase, and then come up with possibly maybe another design or another prototype. Okay, so once you are satisfied with your prototype, you go and test with your user, then receive feedbacks. If it's not up to expectation, you go back to the drawing board, and then the stage repeats. So as you can see, there's no very clear or rather a straightforward way to achieve the final product. It actually takes a lot of repetitive cycles and try and error. Right? And this is what tech giants like Google and Facebook is doing in their design team, right? Because their product actually affects millions, right? If not billions. Okay, first stage, trying to empathize with your user. Okay, so how do we do it, right? We do it by using our traditional methods, which is interviews and survey, right? So this one actually just gives you a general knowledge of the current situation that they are dealing with, right? So how do you go about conducting interviews? Of course, you need to know the demographics of your interviewee. Then you ask questions about their existing methods. Okay, you ask questions about how they go about executing the existing methods, and then you consolidate your information and present it in a visual diagram, right, to report your findings. Okay, so of course, when you do something like this, please remember to introduce yourself. Okay, make your intention known to the interviewees, right? And also try to share a bit about the context, right, of what you are trying to study about. Because I think last time, there's an occasion whereby a peer from a design module, they went to go about, filming and interviewing people without, their approval. So things get a bit complicated. I think the prof is involved to clarify things. So to avoid getting yourself caught in such situations, always try to introduce yourself, right? At the same time, try to seek approval. If need to, ask them to sign a consent form of what you are going to do, right? Because after all, they are your so-called test subject. Okay, let's talk about contextual inquiry. This is another method, right, which combines observation and interviewing of user in their work environment. Why we do this? We want to capture the touch points and channels for their activities, right? We want to obtain first-hand information, right? We want to discover their thought process and then walk them alongside on their user journey. Okay, we want to uncover opportunities where our product can step in and fill in the market gap. How to do it? Okay, of course, you will need actors. They are not really actors per se, because they are not really following a script. But rather, when we talk about actors, I'm talking about interviewee, interviewer, and also those that are helping out to set up the so-called scenario. Then, of course, you need your scenario. You need to have everything planned out in advance, and also a goal, like what are you trying to observe, right? At the end of the day, what scene are you trying to have, your interviewee participate in? Then artifacts, pen and paper, video cameras, all these are sufficient. So this is an example of a scenario. Right, you have minor information like settings to your primary information like how you go about conducting it. So actually, try not to belittle this kind of little information, right? So say you are trying to create a karaoke app, right? Then you are stuck in a design dilemma. You don't know what kind of room size you should develop. You should develop for. So if that happens, it is always nice to actually go back and refer to the scenarios during your research stage, and then from there you can observe actually this scenario is meant for a group of size 4. So actually this gives you a hint that you should design a karaoke booking app for a group of size 4, right, instead of other numbers. So you can see that how useful this kind of minor details and information are, right? So, okay, so this is a contextual inquiry that me and my friend did last time. There's a bit of comedic accents to it, but I will play the video. But more importantly, I want you to pay attention on how we identify the pain points in this video, right? This is for a karaoke booking app, right? So we are trying to figure out what problem these three guys are currently facing. Let me see if I can play the video real quick.
You know what? Don't talk about this. Can we just go see here?
喂，幸福 KTV 他们几位我们只剩5点半、6点半凌晨3点半Can I book a room, please? Hello, I'm sorry. Can you speak English, please?
So actually, there's miscommunication.
什么？要我说英文？小明，2号房结账。我现在很忙稍等。你不说中文就别打来。Hello, yes. I would like to book a small room.
So unfortunately, the outlet has moved, right? So this is actually another problem.
Hello, yes. I would like to book a small room. Happy day. Hello, welcome to Happy Time. The room will be the first one to the right. Okay, Alright, thank you. Bye-bye. They finally can say K. We are so excited. Jeez. Where's the TV? How to say K? You don't even have a karaoke machine. Alright, I give up. I give up. It's more feel than my finals.
Okay. So as you can see, their karaoke booking journey is not a smooth sailing one. They encounter a lot of problems in between, where an app can actually come in to actually address some of these issues that they are facing, right? So after you have gathered your video artifact, you might want to break down it into what we call a user journey map, which captures every steps taken by your user, something like this. So in each steps or each stage, we are concerned about the user goal, we are concerned about your emotion. And then at the same time, we try to identify some opportunities where our app can come in, right? And this is also useful in helping to keep your design focused and relevant. So how do you go about designing a user journey map? Okay, so each stage you need to have a scenario, a goal for this scenario, the emotions, right, that the participants are feeling at that point of time, and also the problems that they are facing, and the opportunities, right, where your products can step in, and then try to form a concrete problem statement to kind of summarize each stages. Okay, am I going too fast? I hope not. Okay, so the next method will be affinity diagram, right? This is actually a fun one because what you do is you actually pen down your user feedback and what you observe into small little post-it, right? And then you try to lump them up together, form a category, and then eventually it helps you see the bigger picture, right? Which is easier for you to address instead of individual data points, individual feedback, sorry, because that's just too much noises. What we want is to address the underlying problems. So how do we go about doing this exercise, right? So first we pen down individual points on a post-it, right? A yellow post-it. So one post-it should only have one individual point or one feedback. Then you try to find some similarity between them, group them together into a blue label, right? Then if possible, you try to congregate them into a pink label, right? Which talks about the primary concern across blue label. Then at this point, you will have a few pink label. Then eventually you can try to synthesize them into an area of concern that you are actually dealing with. And this is the goal of this entire activity. Okay, we slowly work our way up from bottom to top. Okay. So example, okay, so this are the feedback, right, that I received when I'm doing my karaoke booking app, right? Let's take a look at the first column. Okay, the first column actually talks about things like line distortions and the reception is not picking up when you're making a booking, right? It seems that the communication line is very fuzzy, which leads to lack of clarity, right? If I were to lump them up together. Then the next column talks more about navigation issues, right? We talk about incorrect distance estimations and the reliance of Google Maps. So these two actually forms what we call communication, right? Because if you think about it, information is rather inaccurate, right? Which led to the problem we saw in the earlier video. Now, the third column, right? We have things like no booking record found and also peak hours, right? Elements like this will go under booking, right? And booking is often tied to what? Tied to expectation, right? Because of course, when you book a particular karaoke room, definitely you have some baseline expectation for it. And then the fourth column is more about noises. You're asking about recommendations, right? Sometimes friends has no preference when it comes to the choice of locations. Then last but not least, we are dealing with things like location, service, and sort by zone. Okay, this sounds to me like filtering, right? So eventually we have things like suggestion and filtering, which mix up to form findings, right? Findings in another words means to be able to find a suitable location to sing karaoke. So these three can be further synthesized into my karaoke experience. So in other words, you need to make sure that your karaoke booking app is able to provide a smooth sailing booking experience for your user, right? So that is the primary concern of the app. Okay, any question at this point? Let me check my chat. Okay, no questions. So far, so good. If I'm going too fast, please let me know. Okay. So some common ground rules. Place one notes at a time. Try to read aloud so that others can hear when doing this activity. Okay, and try to challenge each other on the existing position. The whole point is to stir a discussion. Okay, if you cannot fit your idea, don't die, try to force it into a label, right? Create a new category. Then if a individual point belongs to two groups, make a second note, right? Because ultimately we only care about the big picture, in this case the label. We don't really care about the individual data points at the bottom level. Okay, so for affinity node that does not belong to any group, don't worry about them. Paste them together, paste them aside. revisit them later. And who knows, you might need to discard them later on because you realize that they could be possibly outliers. Okay. Okay, now we have reached the second stage. We will need to define our problem statement. Okay, so what better way to define a problem statement, than to build empathy in your user, right? And this can be done through empathy map, right? So basically, this touch on the user senses and how they are dealing with their pains and their gains, mainly the frustration and how they can benefit from it. So first off the bat, we have things like the first section will be what do they think and feel. So here are some examples. Okay, to me it seems like these are mainly like thoughts, self-questioning, and also their feeling, right? Okay, next we have what do they see. Okay, where does their eyeball let them, right? So maybe they might first look for referral discounts, or maybe they might be greeted with error messages, or maybe they are looking for user profile. So it's really where their eyes are directing them to. Okay, what do they say? This is more towards a feedback, right, for the designer, right, and their expectation, like whether they want this or whether they want that, and maybe asking questions to the designer along their way to clarify their doubts, right? Okay, and what do they actually do? If it's an e-commerce application, they might be comparing products, they might be asking friends, or they might be applying promo code. Okay, this is actually quite interesting because sometimes you realize that what they do does not align with what they see or what they think. So for example, if the first thing that they want to look for is promo code, then you will be surprised, sometimes end of the day, how come you didn't go and apply the promo code? Then the reason being that there's terms and conditions involved. So these are essential informations that you ought to pick it up. Okay, what do they hear? Mainly noises, adverbs, newsletters, right? Things like buy one get one free promotional news, etc. Then ultimately you can sum them up into what we call pains, which is your frustration, right? This user is dealing with expensive room rates or products being sold out, or maybe a e-commerce site. Okay, so this one is parked under frustration and fear. Then after that, you definitely need your user to benefit in some way or another from using your app. User might want things like time saving, want things like assurance, want things like cheaper rates, and also discovery of new locations. This one goes under their goals and needs, right? Okay, so here's a simple exercise to actually illustrate what I have said so far. So I think how I want to do it is that I will go through each of them. Then you guys will try to either drop a message in a group chat, or or raise it out verbally, right? On the answer to each card. So first off, we have things like confusing. Where do you think it should go? Any takers? This one should be an easy one. Yes, someone mentioned it. It should be tucked under emotions, think and feel. Okay, the next one, convenience. This should also be an easy one. Any idea? You can shout out the answer. Make sure you unmute yourself. Yes, one of your peers have pointed it out. It should be parked under gains. Okay, where can I find it? Okay, this sounds to me like self-questioning. Any idea? Okay. Okay, next one, Googling. This is something that we do every now and then. Okay, then miscommunication. Okay, what's the fastest way? I think this is a tricky one. Okay, there's another category. I think you can also park it under think and feel, because sometimes you might be questioning yourself when running through a particular app, especially when you are new to an app. You want to ask yourself how certain things can be done this way. And of course, this can also be a comment, right? This can be also a questions that you raise to the designer along the way. Okay, the next one is friends' suggestion. What do you think? Yeah, friend suggestion, this one. Okay, here. Okay, Huawei is in trouble. Okay, this is in quotation. This sounds like a news to me. Right? So, yeah, right. Then second last will be quit. Where do you, okay, correct. Then the last one is information that you see on site, right? 2,404 users bought this. Sometimes they add this to entice user to purchase. Okay, another way to develop or rather to build a good concrete problem statement is actually kind of like design a fictional profile, or what we meant as persona, right? So what it does is that it actually reflects some of the experience and traits which you would acquire in your previous stage. You know, just now we are doing contextual inquiry, right? So you try to synthesize all this information and then try to transform it into a fictional profile. So it kind of add like a human touch to it to improve relatability, right? So at the start, you might want to consider adding a profile picture, right? You talk about the name, talk about the occupation, talk about the attitude, right, of him trying to use a particular application or him trying to solve a particular pain point. Then you talk about his demographics, personal traits, talk about his motivations, okay, give a small background of his habit and lifestyle, mainly what kind of channel the person is using, what kind of methods the person is adopting to achieve his or her goal. Then also we talk about the person's aptitude, in this case the ability to adopt technology, pain point, preferred channels, right? And also how this person would interact with the product should you launch it in the market, right? So after we are done, we are now more equipped, right, to come up with a concrete problem statement, right? So can I request that you actually add this problem statement to your proposal, right? So instead of writing very lengthy motivation or introductory paragraph in your proposal, which I observe many teams do, please do your advisor and your mentor a favor. Right? Try to combine them, come up with a very short and concise problem statement, which covers the following area: problem, solution, target audience, and gain. So at one glance, we know exactly what your proposal is talking about. I give you an example. Okay, back to the karaoke example. Okay, so let me just quickly read. To overcome the difficulties of securing a karaoke room during peak hours, we can consolidate information across outlets, right? So that karaoke goers can perform their search in a single place to save time. Okay, so pay attention to the highlight segment. So from this problem statement, I can tell immediately that karaoke goers are facing the problem of not being able to secure a karaoke room. So what they want is to actually consolidate all this information, right? It may be into an app, right? Or other kind of solution. And target audience is obviously your karaoke goers, okay? And so that what they can gain in the end will be time saving. Okay, I will give you a negative example. This is actually very bad, right? So to overcome the lack of karaoke rooms, we introduced an app to better facilitate booking and searching in general. Okay, so this absolutely tells me nothing, right, about what you're trying to do, right? I know that you're trying to create an app, but you did not elaborate. I know that you're trying to facilitate booking, but you didn't elaborate. So the solution is not very clear, and how the users can benefit from using your product is very fuzzy. So try to avoid writing statements like this. Okay, any questions? Okay, so be very careful, right, about your cognitive biasness, because sometimes based on the experience you might develop a false sense of assumptions which does not reflect the reality. So eventually we will have the problem of perceived problem versus real problems, right? So an example of perceived problems will be like, maybe security teams in each shift is understaffed and lackluster. This is more like a thought you have in your mind, right? Or rather an opinion. But in reality, what you observe is that there's a poor allocation of manpower, right? Because the allocation is not done in consideration of the demand, right? So if you can really find out the real problem, then you can come up with a very concrete and feasible solution, which is to come up with a proper allocation plan, right? For security teams in each shift to be sufficiently skilled and staffed, right? Because having perceived problem alone doesn't allow you to properly craft a proper solution to tackle the real problems. Okay, now we move on to the ideation stage, right? So using all the information you have gathered in your research phase, we are now ready to brainstorm some key features, right, for our application. Okay, so to generate some ideas for key feature, we have to ask ourselves questions, right? So these questions should be prefixed with a how might we in the front. So, okay, suppose we are trying to create a social media app, right? Possible question will be, how might we get youth to be more social so they feel more engaged and motivated? This could be one. Or if you are creating a karaoke booking app like me, you might want to ask questions like, how might we enable booking info to be more accessible? Okay, or you want to ask questions like, how might we inform our users so they feel more confident, right? Okay, then the fourth one is actually quite interesting, because it actually challenged some of the existing methods, right, using a how might we question. So in this case, you can see that the person is saying like, how might we secure a bicycle without purchasing a bicycle lock? So this one actually stirs some brainstorming ideas on how this can be done. Can it be done? This is up to you and your co-pilot to actually discuss, right? So the last one will be more towards design decisions. How might we improve searching so that the results can be attained by no more than 5 steps, right? Because you want to keep your user flow neat and clean, right? To make sure that the user can achieve their goal in the shortest time possible. So these are really some very good questions, right? How might we, that you might want to ask yourself when generating features for your application. Okay. Okay, do's and don'ts when writing in quality, how might we question? Make sure that the scope of your how might we questions is not too broad. So if you were to ask something like, how might we build a better house, it generates too much noises, right? There's too much opinions, which is very messy and gets to nowhere. Not very good. Or if it's too narrow, it's not very good as well. Like how might we build a door that swings inwards and outwards, right? I think there's only one solution to this, which is not very constructive either. A better one is, how might we, possibly improve traffic flow in a high use area of the house, right? So this one actually gives a small context, a rather small and detailed context of the problems without revealing too much about the solution, right? Because the idea is to make rooms for possibilities and stir discussion among the team, right? So we try to aim to raise questions like this. Okay, next, we can also do something like a storyboard. So what you are seeing here is a storyboard by Disney, right? I think Disney likes to likes their artists to do a storyboard so that it helps them to brainstorm better. So the thing is, before they invest their resources into a film, they will actually have their artists to draw out different scenarios, hanging up against the wall, and then have their teams look at it, right, in, of course, chronological orders to see whether a particular scenario makes sense, right? And of course, we can learn from it, right? And to do so, we need things like your actors, the people that's involved. We need a scenario. We need a goal, right? Okay, give you an example. Say we have a person called Gary Wong. He wants to go on a holiday, but he's super lonely, so he wants to go with a travel companion. So maybe the first scene talks about the big picture he has in mind. Okay, he already has a plan of where he should be going and when he should be going, right? But the problem is he's very lonely, he has no one, he has no girlfriend, he has no friends to go with. So he went online, do some research, look for people who think, who are like-minded like he is, right? Who wish to go to the same places as well. The kind of channel he's using probably on desktop, mobile phones, or maybe he would go to blog sites, Instagrams to look for people who are adventurous as him. Then after that, when he's done, then he will then send out invitations and then receive a successful matching, communicates with the traveler. Then of course he would have attained his goal of being able to travel somewhere of his desire and to find a travel companion. Right, so this is actually an example of how you can do a storyboard. Okay, so some ways that help you get started. Okay, so to help you, solidify your thoughts and and process. So you plan your storyboard with plain text and arrow, obviously. So how I find it useful is that I always visualize the first and the last step, my trigger point and also my end goal, so that it allows me to fill in the intermediate steps in between, right, to eventually form a coherent chronological timeline of the scenarios that we are dealing with. Then you try to put yourself in your actor's shoes, right? Try to add some emotions. Try to brainstorm about how they think, right, at a different point of time. So obviously, just now we know that at the beginning the person feels very upset, right? Because the person is very lonely, cannot find a travel companion. But eventually his mood starts to turn for the better, right? When he realizes that, actually there's other people who are like me that is looking for a companion, right? Then he gets brighter. Then it kind of like lead up, and then eventually, being able to achieve his goal of traveling with others, right? So we try to illustrate each scene using an image. Maybe draw like a stickman, don't have to be overly fanciful, like what I've shown earlier. Okay, any questions? Noah should be quite clear. So these are actually some tools to help you brainstorm and develop a marketable product. Okay, so the result is actually a very, very coherent storyboard, right? From start to finish, right? We can effectively capture the kind of medium that the person is using, right, to achieve a goal. And at the same time, we try to also add in some conversational dialogue in between to convey their thought process, right? And also the emotions is also effectively portrayed in each actor, right, in each scene. Right, after we are done, okay, we try to develop a prototype, right? So when we talk about prototype and mock-ups, then we talk about 3 types of fidelity, which I'm pretty sure like some, if you would have, intern as a designer, you will heard people talking about things like, low fidelity, mid fidelity, high fidelity. So what do they actually means, right? So in other words, all 3 are actually mock-ups, but the higher the fidelity, the more detailed your mockup is. So at the start, we have things like low fidelity, which is your wireframe, right? So what is the purpose of a wireframe, right? It is actually the backbone representation of your app. What does it do? It is actually meant to provide a basic layout and information architecture. So in other words, it is to convey the structure of your application, right, and also the user flow from screen A to screen B. Right? Don't have to be very fanciful. Just do it using line box and grayscale colors. Right? This is our intention at the beginning. And of course, it's very cheap, right? Because this is done using lines and boxes. If you want to make some adjustments, you just strap it and take another piece of paper, right? You want to try to do this as early as possible. You don't want it to realize that actually you have a problem at the end of everything, especially when you're already developing the app, right? Because the cost is very, very expensive, right? By then, things would have been finalized. Okay, how to go about drawing some of the elements in a low 5, okay? So it's actually very simple. So if you look at things like icons, you just draw some of the more established ones to represent what they're trying to do, right? So, and also for things like placeholder, you just draw an X. You don't have to, pay too much attention of the content that is inside it, because that's not the point, right? The point is to convey structure, is to convey usability, and to convey user flow from one screen to another. Okay, so once you're confident, you think that it works, right? Okay, sorry, one more slide. Okay, so how do you start? You try to have the big picture. What is the goal of the page? Always ask yourself that. Every page should be meaningful. What the user is supposed to do, right, to actually reach the goal of this current page. Okay, whether the user is supposed to press a button, whether user is supposed to scroll, etc. What does the user expect to see, right? So try to put yourself in the shoes of the user. Try to think of what their eyes will lead them to. Try to think of what they wish, right, to use in your application. Sorry, in your user interface, right? And try to brainstorm a bit on how you want to organize your content, right? So obviously, based on convention, your search bar is usually at the top, right? You don't have search bar in the middle of your user interface, because that's not intuitive, right? So things like that, please go and organize them. Then last but not least is your CTA. CTA actually means call to action, right? This is the action that is responsible for driving your adoption rates and also your conversion rates, right? Which is the key intention of your user interface. So you want to position them strategically. You don't want to position them all the way at the bottom of the app, because obviously it's not very smart to do so. User have to scroll down. You want to put it at a place that is prominent and it makes sense, right? For example, sometimes you need to do A, B, and C in order to proceed with your CTA. So make sure you organize it in such a order. Okay, next one. Okay, so here's an online wireframe tool which is very popular. right? No, not a lot of fanciful elements like Photoshop or XD. This is mainly for low fidelity. Okay, the summing is 1. Okay, then after that, you can move on to the high fidelity already. So as you guys will have known by now, it's just your low 5 with an additional touch of fanciful element like colors, fonts, interactions, etc. Then this will help you to produce a mockup that is closer to the real product, right? So details, right, will be reflected right upon the high 5 prototype. I will be covering this next week. I will talk more about the choice of colors, the choice of typographies, and also the choice of and also the considerations behind some of the key UI elements like buttons and layouts. Okay. Also, you want to think about interaction, right? So this is actually a interaction sheet to capture some of the more common interactions. So if you're trying to design a new interaction, try to make sure that you stick to the 2-tab rule. Don't make it overly complicated, right? But of course, you have to take a look at some of the default gestures that is already established in the mind of the user, because your job is to help to improve on what they already know rather than to re-engineer the entire process. Right? Make sense? Okay. Okay, prototyping tools and kits, a lot. Personally, I use Sketch. I use Adobe XD, also alongside with this thing called InVision, where you upload your mockup for collaboration purposes. This one also allows you to create interactive mockups by planting mini hotspot on your screens that links from one screen to another through interactive gesture. The rest, I think you guys can go and explore a bit, but these are all useful tools. And the more popular one, obviously. Questions. Okay, so I want to throw you guys a question, right? Can you name 3 differences between a wireframe and a prototype? Okay, any takers? Either shout out your answer or type your answer in the group chat. Okay, maybe let's talk about the purpose, right? How are they different? Okay, anyone? Okay, so one of your peers has mentioned, right? A wireframe is more of a skeleton, then a prototype has more details involved. This is absolutely correct. More details also means that we are more concerned with the aesthetic aspect of a prototype, right? Okay, so another difference that I can think of is that wireframe is usually much more messy. Prototype is the elements are much better aligned, right? And also there's a very clear difference in terms of the resource allocator. Like wireframes, usually you just need a piece of pen and paper and then you're set to go. Don't have to spend too much time. Prototype actually involves more work, right? Because you need to design it on tools such as your Photoshop, your XD, your Sketch, etc., etc. Okay, yeah. One person mentioned low 5 and high 5, correct? Also, another person mentioned that yes, Y5 usually you have to go through more iterations, right? When you reach to the stage of high 5, you shouldn't be going through that many iterations to specifying the minor details of your interface. Okay, basic organization, yes and yes. Okay, do you guys need a break? I'm just curious. Okay. Otherwise, I think we can end this workshop earlier than expected. Okay, we have come to the last stage, which is testing, right? Okay, testing, of course, test with user, right? Who else are we going to test with? First, we need to determine whether our mockups is able to drive customer satisfaction. We want to determine whether our product is usable, right? Because no one likes an unusable product. And also it helps you to save costs. The earlier you identify a problem, the cheaper it is to fix. And also how effective it is actually depends on how detailed your prototype is, right? But of course, you need not have to be very detailed, but make sure that the key elements are necessary for user to perform their actions to complete a task is actually all there. Okay, how to conduct usability testing? Okay, you need to first identify your subject's demographic. You don't just distribute invitation to anyone. You want to know clear your target audience. Okay, you try to identify what you're trying to test, right? Yeah, obviously not trying to test everything, right? Test one feature at a time. Try to identify some constraints and confounders because you want to make sure that the test is as controlled as possible. You try to limit the amount of confounders. Possible confounders will be the type of maybe operating systems your user is used to. So if your user is used to maybe Android, then if you are showing him an iOS, you are showing him an interface design that aligns with the iOS guideline, then obviously he or she will be very lost, right? And start asking basic questions like, how do I find this? How do I do that? So this is something that is important and should be taken note of because it will affect the response of your usability testing. Okay, design mini activities and scenarios for them to go through with very clear objective. Okay, so as they walk through, as you walk them through, or rather as they progress, you want them to voice aloud their thoughts so that you can actually listen, take notes, and maybe, if possible, ask for their permission to actually screen share what they are seeing on their with their eyes, and also video record, of course, with their consensus. So these are clear cut. So after you follow up with their participants, you ask questions like, hey, just now, I noticed that you didn't press this button A. What might be going through in your mind, right? So have you thought of pressing that button? Yes or no? Why? And the reason behind a specific behavior that's exhibited. Okay, keep the duration as conducive, as productive as possible. Anything more than 1 hour, user might get bored and this might affect their performance. Sample test plan. This is just a template, right? With all the informations that I have mentioned so far. So more importantly, you want to talk about the procedure, right, at the bottom, how the intended steps the user should take, so that later when you are watching the video of your user, you can actually try to compare it with this sample test plan, right? The actual steps versus the theoretically correct steps that they should be taking, right? So maybe, in your mind, you might be thinking, a person need to take 5 steps to reach from point A to point B, but actually the user is much more smarter than you think. He's able to reach there within 3 steps. So 2 types of data that we are talking about. We want to talk about qualitative data. We can also talk about quantitative data, right? Qualitative data falls under your opinions and observations. Then quantitative data is more towards figures and matrices, right? Let's talk about the first one. It actually answers the why. So in other words, is formative and summative. So what I meant by that is, okay, it tells you what is happening. It also tells you the reason why you are seeing this particular data trend, right? This is what it means by formative and summative. Okay, I think I saw a question, right, by Magda. Whoever type basic organization, can you please clear the, oh, okay, so this is a comment, not a question. Okay, so the third one will be think aloud, because when you are dealing with opinions and observations, you are actually engaging with the interviewee. So you can have it controlled, at the same time request them to actually voice out their thoughts. Okay, you try to keep it as constructive as possible. Keep it less than 5, because obviously it takes a lot of time to conduct this kind of sessions, right? Anything more than that, you know, you will have information overload, then it becomes a bit fuzzy when it comes to decision making. Quantitative is actually very clear cut, right? It actually shows you the what, but it's only summative lah. So it's, in other words, it only show you the data trend. It doesn't tell you the reason behind why certain things why certain things occur, right? And obviously you cannot engage with participants directly, right? Because quantitative is, we are dealing with figures and matrices, right? And these are usually often done through, you know, conducting surveys and disseminating it to the public. Okay, this is difficult to control. You cannot control how your participants are filling up your survey, right? You don't know how they are doing it. Maybe because sometimes they don't really have any incentive, they might quickly just check the first options, right? Just to save time. And this is very inaccurate in my opinion, right? So sometimes you might also want to think about giving them incentive, right? So they can better respond. Okay, obviously you can conduct a large sample with it. So, you know, once your survey is ready, you just disseminate it. So which one is better? There's no winner. Okay, you need both, because not only do you want to find out the data trend, you also want to find out why. Right? The key question is why, right? Because it forms the bigger picture that drives your design decision. Okay, so when you ask questions, please be clever. Okay, use your 5W1H. Ask questions regarding to their user flow. Ask questions regarding their feelings, right? Ask questions regarding how they will go about accomplishing it. Then ask questions about why certain odd behaviors is being exhibited. You want to find out why, so that they can explain to you, right? Don't just let them live like this. Try to find out more, right? Okay, and try to question their assumptions, right? And of course, if you are creating a product, then ask them whether you can envision themselves using something different, right? Obviously, if they are so used to using a particular product, maybe there's no room for your product to even come in, right? Like, can you imagine someone creating someone trying to emulate Facebook, right? So the question is, if you ask people, can you envision themselves using something different rather than Facebook? More likely you are going to get the answer no, right? So of course, this is just one example, unless you can offer something more unique on the table. Okay, so dumb questions that you shouldn't be asking. Don't ask questions that can be dismissed through yes or no. So if you ask whether A is better than B, they can say yes or no, not very meaningful. You ask person how easy was the task, very difficult to answer you back. And if you ask people, do you agree or disagree, right? They might be pressured, right, to skew their response in a particular direction, because you already say a majority say XXX. Then if you disagree, then it will make you look like the minority. Then people might be pressured to agree with you, right, or agree with the majority. Okay, how you want to collect qualitative? So just now I think was, no, we are still on qualitative. A/B testing. So A/B testing is more about dividing your user group into two, right? So each group will be testing on a different design, right? You split it into two groups. Each group will be testing on a different design, and then you try to compare their responses at the end of the day, right? And when you're doing it, obviously try to test only one variable at any time, right? Maybe it can be things such as your button color or button size, right? Try not to have too many variables, right? So maybe, in design A, you have a button which is of circular shape, for example. Then maybe in design B, you have a button that is of rectangular shape. So this itself is already one variable, okay? And of course, when you're testing it, try to try to make sure that it's meaningful to you at the end of the day. So when we talk about buttons, what's more important is your call to action button, right? So try to gear your test more towards that segment. Then A/B testing also answers the what, not the why, right? Because you are just disseminating your mockups, right, to different user group, right, and then collecting feedback at the end of the day. It's not like you're actually inviting them over and then asking them to voice out loud, no, right? So this one also requires initial hypothesis, right? So maybe you can hypothesize things like, oh, design A can be accomplished within 3 steps, or design A, people can go off screen for at least 2 screens, meaning to say that they can be they might diverge, right, from the actual workflow by at least 2 screens. So these are some initial hypotheses that you can actually make up and then try to compare it with the actual response. And of course, it can be useless, right, when it doesn't when it doesn't coincide with your assumptions. Then maybe you might want to think whether whether this feature is actually useful to the participants, or whether is there even a need for such a feature. So a lot of questioning through testing, right? And this is actually very good because you are dealing with users, right? Instead of working based on your own assumptions. This is what it means to create a marketable product. Okay, I think this is a website for a list of A/B testing. Okay, matrices or dependent variables. So these are variables that actually changes, right, when you introduce various factors, right? So maybe if you introduce factors like the size of your button, then maybe that will affect your dependent variable, in this case, your duration. So maybe the smaller the size of the button, the shorter the duration. The bigger the size of the button, the shorter the duration, vice versa. Right? You can also even test for the error rate, right? The number of pages that goes off that goes off track. You can talk about exit rate, the number of people that's exiting from your app. You can also talk about the bounce rate, the number of people that exit from your app from the first entry point, meaning to say that they didn't even go about exploring other page. When they reach the first point, the first entry point, they exit immediately. So this will be under bounce rate, right? Exit rate is different, so please don't be confused between these two terms, right? I think if you are a designer in your future, or you are a developer, you confirm will be greeted by this kind of terminology or jargons at work. Okay, so good to know in advance. And also you want to measure the task completion, how much percentage of your tester managed to completely successfully accomplish the task that you assigned to them. Okay, so another thing is to make sure to test both of your iterations concurrently. What I mean by that is that try to avoid having your user group test 2 different designs in a sequential manner, right? Because what happens is that, if you let them test design A first, right, they might actually learn something from design A which they can apply to design B. And this actually affects the response of design B, right? Because they are much more smarter when they are asked to test design B by then, right? So a better way is to actually have 2 separate groups. Each group deals with a separate design, individually. Okay. Any questions? Yeah, I think we have reached like the 1 hour mark, right? Let me ask if there's any questions. Okay, okay, one person has a question. Okay, in the meantime, while waiting for your friend to type out their questions, you can maybe take a 1 or 2 minutes break. Okay, this is a very good question, right? So one of your peers actually asked, you know, how can we go about tracking where the person is looking when navigating through UI? So actually, there's this tool called Maze, which you can explore, right? Which actually reflects information through a heat map, right? So of course, you know, heat map, there's like different regions of colors, and actually the intensity of the colors reflects the person's concentration. Okay, not only that, they can also reflect the number of times a user is clicking. So this actually gives you some idea of where the person is looking at when navigating through UI. Okay, actually, I think there's a slide that talks about that. Let me see. Yeah, so this is what I'm talking about. Maze is actually free, but I think if you upgrade it, you can actually do testing for more than 3 prototypes, right? So what happened? Okay, and to also answer your question, what happened is that you create like mini missions. Okay, you upload your screens, you create interactive gestures that link from one screen to another. You create mini missions where, you know, a specific goal is to be entrusted to your participants. Then after that, you share the URL to your tester, right? You disseminate the mini mission. Then after that, you can view a feedback and report, right? You can see the region where they are clicking, and most likely the region where they are clicking is also the region where they are paying attention to, right? This is actually very cool. You can actually see the heat map, you know, then you can actually see the direct success, right? The number of people that actually follows the correct, you know, execution, and the number of people that actually deviate from the correct execution steps that is indicated by you, of course. Then you can see the success rate, right? Then it actually gives you some ideas how successful your user interface is, right? But this is more geared towards user interface. It doesn't really tell you how marketable your product is, but it just tells you how user-friendly your interface is. Okay, so does that answer your question? Do you think it's useful? You can go and find out. Right? Personally, I enjoy using this tool called Maze. Right? One reason is because it's free, you know, and it allows me to quickly test and disseminate it to people. Right? And at the same time, you also get qualitative feedback, right? You can see people say things like, oh, the UI is very neat and very clean. Then you can also see things like, you know, not sure if an aggregator like me would like it, but I like the design. These are actually very valuable opinions if you think about it, right? But most of them, you can see the comments leans more towards the user experience and also the user interface. Right? So it actually provides you a lot of insights into your application. Right? Other tools that you can talk about. You have your common Google Analytics and your heat map, right? These are more expensive toys that you can play with. Okay, this heat map is actually different from Maze. This one actually plants a sensor. I'm not sure whether it's a sensor. I think it's more like a glass, right? Where you need your participants to wear, then it will monitor where their eyes is directing them to, right? And then it will send information to his tool. Then it will generate a heat map report. Also, some visualization diagrams you can consider using, right? You can consider portraying your data in the form of a bar chart, portraying your data in the form of a pie chart, and also your traditional line chart, right? So actually, these links will showcase all the type of visualization you can do. Okay, because of the COVID situation, right, we can't really do this activity, but so this will be turned into a take-home exercise instead. But I strongly recommend you guys to do it. I think at this stage, you guys have already finished milestone 1, right? If I'm not wrong, I just saw the announcement by Zhao Jing. So by now you should have received feedback, right, from your mentor or advisor. Then some of the feedback can be good, some of the feedback can be, maybe unpleasant, things like that. So if you are caught in that kind of situation, maybe you want to rethink, right, using strategies like a storyboard, right? So really just take out a piece of A4 paper, try to draw like stickmans on how your application will flow, right? Story can either from a first person perspective, or it can be scenario based from a third person perspective. Okay, include the following components like what I've mentioned. Make sure that it's coherent in chronological time order. Okay, less words, more pictures. The whole point is for you to comprehend as quickly as possible, and also use as a collaborating tool with your co-pilot, right? So that at one glance, you know what problem you are trying to solve, right, through your storyboard. Okay, the second exercise, actually, I really wanted to do this because it actually helps you, try to derive the underlying problems of your app, right? Instead of dealing with individual feedbacks, right? But again, due to the current situation, please, spend some time to do this at home. You just need a few post-its, write some individual data points, paste it on a wall or something, then try to group them together and try to see, what is actually the underlying problems, right? How you want to do this? I'll quickly run through them, right? You pen down each feedback on an infinity note, and remember to work your way up, like what I've mentioned. Don't try to force an infinity notes to a category which doesn't fit, okay? Or if it fits more than one category, maybe you might need to duplicate another one. Things that I've mentioned earlier. Wall chart, wall is sufficient. Then you go and group ideas, work your way up from yellow to green, from green to pink, from pink to green, right? Sorry, from yellow to blue, blue to pink, and then pink finally to green, right? Green is the topics that you are dealing with. Then, of course, try to challenge each other. Keep doing, step 2 and step 3, right? Because different people have different opinion on where a affinity that affinity node should be placed. Try to stir some discussions, be it agreement or disagreement. And then, of course, end of the day, you can definitely draw some patterns, right, to discover the underlying relationships, right? Because when you ask people mainly speak from their main experience, right? He or she doesn't know the underlying problems, but rather just share with you the experience that is surfacing for them. So what you want to do is to actually consolidate all these experience and try to draw common similarities between them. Okay. Keep your feedback short and concise. Another tip is to write in first person so that it's much more relatable. Use things such as I, we, right? Then try to focus on usability and whether the product address the stated problems, right? So sometimes you might have feedback that is not very meaningful, right? It has nothing to do with your application design decision whatsoever. Then make sure that you don't include them in this exercise. Okay, I think we have reached the end. I think we are earlier than usual because I think these two activities are actually meant to be done on site, right? So as human beings, okay, so this is a quote, right? For Orbital 2019 that I've come up with. I think it's still relatable. So what I'm trying to say is that as human beings, designers are all biased, right? And can only see the world through their own eyes, right? However, they can keep in mind the fact that from designing from now on, designers must strive to the best of their abilities to keep their biasness and start learning about their user, who after all are their valued customer. So long story short, so what I'm trying to say is that don't always work with your assumption because that will lead to your biasness. Try to understand your user a bit more, right? Try to put yourself in their shoes. Try to adopt the strategies and methodologies that are covered, right? And then you will start to explore something. You will start to discover something that is different from your expectations, right? Because if you don't do this, oftentimes you might end out disappointed, right? Especially when you have already derived your final product, and then you realize that certain behaviors exhibited by your user is actually not up to your expectation, right? If the person instead of taking step A, B, C to reach a particular goal, the person instead got fuzzy with their steps and instead use something like a C, B, or A, right? Then obviously something is wrong, you're not listening to your user, right? And you're not designing for yourself. This is very important. You're designing for your customer, right? If you design for yourself, it's not called a product. It's just called it's more like a side hobby already, right? But if you are designing for your customer, then you can claim that your work is actually a product, right? So there's actually a customer element involved in it. Okay, does it make sense? Okay, so I think we have come to the end. I think I've talked a lot. I wanted to give you guys some break, but I guess majority doesn't need it. So next week I will be talking about user interface. This is very, very, very technical. I will try to upload the slides ASAP, right? Prior to next week's workshop, right? So actually you can understand some of the key considerations behind the UI components like buttons, so maybe for buttons, what are the sizes to use? What are the colors to use? What are the font to use, right? It's not anyhow one, by the way, because if you anyhow design your user interface, if you upload it to an Apple Store or iOS Store, you won't get approved one. So there's some guidelines to follow. It's not like suka, you like this color, then you just throw this color. You like this font, you just throw this font. No, there's actually guidelines to follow. And also, it will take place the same timing as today, next week, Saturday. Okay, so now I will open the ground to any questions, right, that you guys might have. So any questions so far? Okay, maybe I give you guys a sneak preview, okay, of next week's user interface workshop. Okay, do you guys want to see it? Okay, might as well, right? Okay, let me see. So this part one is really talking about user experience and trying to validate your project idea. So let me see. So it's not completed yet. I'm still in the midst of consolidating the slides, but you can actually see me talking about the fonts that you should use for iOS and Android, right? So like I said, it's not anyhow, and you need to actually follow a certain protocol. Then I will talk about things like buttons, button types, primary, secondary, right? Then I will talk about selectors, right? Very, very technical stuff. right? So if possible, I try to upload this in advance. I will talk about things like radio buttons, checkbox, toggle switch, toggle buttons, compare between them when you should use that, right? It's not suka just use one. You know, actually there's some rationale behind how they are being used, right? And also some exercise in between. I will give you some tips on how to design a good user interface, but this will be for next week. I'm still trying to consolidate all the all the informations that I've received, right? So things like that, just to give you a sneak preview, and of course some useful reads, right? And also I think talk about some CSS items, right? When you deal with buttons, you talk about different states. All these I will cover next week. Okay, back to part 1. Okay, so any questions so far? With regards to the exercise, how to make it, constructive. It can be anything, or what strategies should I adopt? Things like that. Any questions so far? Right, or if you have any questions regarding your project, you can also raise them here. Since we have some spare time, right? Aside from those doing post consultation with some of our guys later on. Yeah, so any questions, or if you want, you can share your screens to maybe talk about your proposal, things like that, and we can all give feedbacks and then discuss, right? That will be also useful for this conduct as well. Okay, I think I'm seeing a lot of questions regarding UI. Is there a uniform font, okay, across both iOS and Android? The question is yes. iOS use San Francisco font. Android use Roboto font. Okay, hang on. Go back. Yes, there's even a dedicated size for your font. Mostly, I think even numbers, right? I think Android mostly even numbers. For iOS, maybe when it gets smaller, you start to see some odd numbers. Right, let me see. Any other questions? The framework doesn't matter. The framework and library doesn't matter. This is just to make sure that your app can get approved by the App Store. But if you are trying to roll out a mobile app, mobile app means that you are not uploading it to a Play Store. It can be accessed from maybe like a Chrome or Safari browser. You don't have to concern about all these kind of guidelines, right? But I would recommend that you try to design it alongside with the Android guidelines, right? Because a majority of our users are Android, right? Based on the market percentage. Yes, someone said, we can opt for custom font. Yes, but this is subject to the approval by the App Store, right? But make sure that your font is consistent, right? You don't want to have a page where you have a font size 50, right? Then maybe another page to have font size 30, another page to have font size 70. Make sure it's consistent. When you use your size, use it strategically, because we are using font size for emphasis purposes. Okay, maybe let me see if I can. Yes, Apple is very strict and they are very greedy. I think you need to pay a lot in order to upload your your app to the iOS store. I can't remember how much. Let me just check iOS App Store upload price. Oh, $99. I think this is 1 year, right? Oh, $99 US. You need to have a developer account with Apple. Then we look at Android. Android developer pricing. I don't know, App Store. Okay, $25 registration fee. Okay, need to pay before you can upload an app. I think this is for 1 year, right? Should be 1 year. Right, but if you are creating a mobile app, then there's no need, right? You can just access it through your Chrome and Safari browser on your phone, right? Also, just now I think I mentioned about the market percentage, right? Let me see if I can find from slides from the previous sessions, you know. Let's see, yeah, right, $99. Is introductory strips. Okay, this is the market share. Okay, I don't know whether this is up to date. I think this one is which year? 2018. I hope it's still relevant. So Android has about 86.1% market share. Then 2.8 million applications, right? 2 billion monthly active users and 6 million Android developers, right? That's why I encourage you to actually design it for the Android market instead. Right, iOS tends to be very strict with the quality of the app uploaded to their app store, so this is something to keep in mind. Right. Also, one more thing is that to better understand how different they are, Android use this guideline. Android use Material IO design guideline. But don't worry, I will cover all this next week, right? So do you know even the colors, applying colors, all these, there's a rule to it, Then for Apple is the human interface guideline. So you can see they are very strict. It's not suka design one. Yeah, I think maybe buttons. So first off the bat, even buttons is very different already. Because that iOS, your iPhone doesn't have a permanent back button at the bottom, right? So you always need to add a back button on the top of your header. But in Android, this is optional, right? Because you have a default hardware back button at the bottom. So you see, it's very, very different. So a back button is compulsory for if you are developing for iOS, right? Any questions so far? I know you guys are more interested in the UI aspect. I'll try to upload the slides ASAP, right? But I feel that, in order to make sure that, this workshop is holistic, I want to cover both UI and UX, right? And also, it also puts you in a better position next time when you go for internship and people say something, then you will be able to quickly grasp what these jargon or terms meant, right? Yeah, this is actually correct. One of our friends talked about, what if you have a bottom navigation bar, then you don't need a back button at the top. That's why I say for iOS, we don't have such thing as bottom navigation bar. The default one, your back, your home, and then your overview. That's why for iOS, you definitely need to have a back button at the top left, right, of your header. Let me see. This is what I'm talking about. Then this bottom header that I'm talking about. Yeah, this is what I'm talking about, this thing. Oh, okay, the app bottom bar. Usually people don't add back button to the bottom navigation tab, right? Because of space constraint, right? You want to add useful shortcuts, right? Things like homes, favorites, right? Primary, more commonly used utilities in your bottom navigation. So be strategic about it, because this is actually a sticky bottom navigation tab, right? Meaning to say that when you scroll, it will just follow with you alongside. So you want to make sure that you want to make sure that those features that you select are strategic, I would say. Okay, any other questions regarding UI that you guys would like to raise? Right, like colors, all these, even though I'm gonna cover next week, but if you guys are curious, maybe I can share with them, right? Because understand that maybe next week not all of us will be available to attend it. So any questions, you can raise them up. Okay, let me see the timing, how much time we have. Okay, I think we have like 20 minutes left. So anyone wants to talk or share about their projects? It's for the benefit of everyone. Otherwise, let me see. I can show you guys an example of the maze tool, right, that I did last time to test my prototype. I hope it's still there. Let me see. Log in with Google. Here. So I disseminated this mission to my peers, right? So how you use it is that you import your new prototype, your mockups, right? Then eventually, I think it will let you to a screen where you can connect the screens together and then create a mission. Okay, so this is a mission, right, that I've created, right? So you can actually see it's very powerful, right? You can even add this to your milestone tree, right, as a feature for usability testing, right? So you can see direct success is 10.9%. So obviously, it tells me that a lot of people are taking the unconventional approach in using my mockup. Then the bounce rate is the people that left, right, who gave up on their first screen. Right, then you see the average duration, 270 seconds, right? That's around, I think, 3 to 4 minutes, right? Hey, by the way, you guys can see my screen, right? Yeah, I hope so. Then you can see, all these screens that I have uploaded, right? Then you see, first tester takes about 208 seconds. Then the misclick rate is 24%. Then later you can see the other tester. This tester is a bit more clumsy. Higher misclick rate. And you can even see the heat map. I think one person talked about heat map, right? Let me see. I can show you. It's loading. There's too many screens. So it's taking so long. Yeah, so in each screens, they will tell you, how many people are testing, what are the time spent, and the percentage of misclick, right? Now this is the heat map that I'm talking about. You see, this actually shows you the region where they are clicking. Some people go and click the picture because they want to find out whether there's, whether it's like a gallery where, you can see other pictures. Then of course, they want to know more information, right? Other options, then they click on show more, right? Then somehow they are not clicking, the booking segment. I don't know why. Things like that, it gives you an insight into how they are behaving, right? So I think the next one might also be able to tell us something. Right. So, but I think eventually they managed to successfully complete the task, right? I think eventually they got a bit curious, so they diverted a bit. Okay, so this is a place where they start playing around with the filters, right? Right. Then they also try to click on the opening hours. I don't know why. Right. This is quite interesting. Maybe it could be a misclick. Then, oh, okay, you can actually see that they are trying to click the Google Map. So hopefully, maybe in terms of expectation, they are hoping that it will brings them to Google Map, right, to pinpoint the location of this karaoke outlet. So very, very cool things like this, right? Okay, let me see if there's another one. Okay, I think that's all about it. I mean, hey, they are clicking the search. No, yeah. Let me see if there's any other screens. Then you can see this person is also a very cheapo. Go and click and go and see all the promotional newsletter, right? Okay, we are not criticizing, obviously, right? We are just throwing out features to test, right? And of course, if they click, it means that it's useful for them. But at the same time, it could also means that they are curious, right? Then they are also going very curious, going and click, you know, whether the outlets that they add to favorite actually went into the favorite category. Right. So very, very interesting stuff. You can see how they are behaving, right? Any questions? I see all the testers. Yeah, you can even see the status. Some people, you know, do halfway, don't want to do, they go and give up. Then maybe you don't want to include them in your final report, right? Then you see this person very quiet. You know, they go and follow the intended path and directions, right? Finish it in you know, in I think within 10 screens or something. Yeah, 7 screens. I finished the task within 7 screens. There are people that give up. Okay, this particular tester is actually very interesting. You know, go and click so much. I think maybe he got lost. Then click until a point where he got fed up and then just give up. Right? You know, he explored a lot of screens. Okay? That's what you can see over here. Right? And this person, you see the amount of time he spent. You know, obviously he got frustrated. Right? So very useful tools. Very useful tool. Okay. Any other questions? You know, regarding this tool or any other tool? Hopefully, I shared a lot, right? Which I hope you guys can find useful when you guys are writing your proposal, you know, or submitting your deliverables for milestone 2, milestone 3, the upcoming ones. Okay, if no questions, then maybe we can end the session a bit earlier. Okay, I actually have one empty time slot because last minute team decided to pull out from the post consultation between 12:30 to 1. Right? So I have one additional slot. So if you guys are interested for me to actually look through your proposal and give some suggestions, feel free to reach out to me on Slack or just ping me directly, right? Hopefully we can utilize all the sessions. Then for the rest that are that are going to, I think, Ryan and Terrence, I hope that they have already reached out to you. If they haven't yet, please contact me ASAP, right? So that we can figure something out. Right, so that's it, right? So those who have post consultation, go for post consultation. Right, the first one starts at 12:30. Otherwise, I will end today's session, you know, on a good note, lah. Right, and also, you know, try to maybe brainstorm, reflect a bit more about the feedbacks that you receive from milestone 1. Definitely, you know, your advisors or your mentors, their experience is definitely relatable, lah, right? But at the same time, don't try to try to, how should I put it? Don't try to come up with a lot of features just to satisfy a very unique use cases, right? Try to take some time and see some similarities between the feedback, right? So if you keep constantly receiving this particular feedback, you know that something is obviously wrong and needs to be addressed. But if you see like a feedback that only appears like one time, then maybe that person, their feedback can be an outlier, right? So something to bear in mind when reading feedbacks. Okay, so someone booked me already at 12:30. Okay, Lim Chun Yong, maybe you can PM me, then I can send you the Zoom invite, okay? Okay, that's all. I will end it, right? Okay, thank you, everyone.